Guru show, and with me is my wonderful garden guru, her one and only, the Sarah Bradshaw. And we're here talking about gardens and getting your garden ready. And hopefully, you've been listening to the show so far, and you got those babies already seeded and started out and sprouting. What you started in the beginning in the greenhouse is now 2 leaves and beyond. So that's pretty exciting. So I think that was when you did that, February 21st, I think you did. So the first seed starting in the greenhouse. So now's the time to get those seeds started for the garden, and to find out what is the best time to plant in this upcoming week. Sarah's going to bring us up to date.
Okay. Well, of course, the really big focus that's coming up this week is we hit the equinox in
Yes, indeed.
yeah. So, once we get past the equinox, we are now gaining daylight hours at a phenomenal rate. You're gaining minutes in the morning, you're gaining minutes in the evening, and each day is going to be getting exponentially longer on us. And that's going to be a real kick for those of us who are ready to rock and roll and get out there. Oh, pardon me. Um, so we're in an odd day today. We're in that we're in Aries, and the moon goes void, of course, in the evening, but it doesn't slide into the next sign until early Tuesday morning. So that sets you up for kind of an evening of taking it easy, getting some socializing done, some light reading, take that break time as it occurs, because when we come out of that void, of course, and into Taurus, planting energy is awesome. Okay, really awesome this week. We're in that first quarter. And although when we're talking about these updates, although the actual time signature of us moving into Taurus at, almost 4 a.m., although that's specific to the Pacific zone, you only need to adjust an hour or two across the board to get where you're going, where you are. So, it's a matter of, if you're in the Eastern time zone, you subtract a couple of hours. And the Pacific time zone is kind of the last one, at least on the continent. And, so everything here actually kind of happens last. We, the new moon can be, right before midnight in Alberta and after midnight here, because everything here happens kind of in the last little bit of things. So we're talking Pacific time zone when I'm getting into specific time signatures, but
And of
in
course, for
general,
those in the US, we're talking about Los Angeles and San Francisco and the
yeah,
West Coast, right?
yeah, it extends all the way down, yeah, so all day tomorrow, the moon goes into Taurus really early. Even if you're in Newfoundland, it's going to be in Taurus long before noon. And so, tomorrow, with the moon being new and it being in Taurus, you've got fabulous earth energy going on there. It's still in the sun is still in Pisces. So, again, you've got that good water growing energy happening. So, Tuesday, absolutely stellar day to transplant and plant. Transplanting can go particularly well in Taurus, because Taurus being an earth sign, you're talking about root development. You're talking about that groundedness. And that's really what you want to have happen when you're transplanting, is you want those roots to just really take off. So this combination from now until Thursday early in the afternoon is really a wonderful, wonderful stellar window to be working with that.
So
Now,
that's Tuesday through to Thursday. Did I
yep,
get that right?
yeah, Tuesday early in the morning all the way to Thursday. The moon goes void, of course, at 1:39 in the afternoon. but it doesn't enter Gemini until 4:45 in Pacific time. So that pretty much gives you the whole afternoon to
Right.
still be in Taurus and working on that energy. And if you've been working on it all along and the moon goes void, of course, that energy will carry you right through that void period.
Mhm.
Periods aren't great for starting things, but they're just great for continuing and finishing it off, you know.
Yeah.
They're excellent for that. So then Thursday, about, supper time, we slide into Gemini, and that does not eliminate planting because there is one particular category that is really fond of being planted in Gemini, and that is the melon family. And
Mm.
this is an ideal time to start your melons. So, your watermelons for sure, your cantaloupes likewise for sure. But most people don't realize that a great number of your cucumbers are indeed more closely related to melons than they are to squash. So this is an excellent time, from Friday through Sunday evening is an excellent time to get those melons and family into the ground. Um,
Now, when you mean that, you mean starting the seeds or actually transplanting them into like
no,
the
no, not
leafy?
into the ground yet, but into, starting the seeds
Yeah,
in the
starting the
ground.
seeds.
Yeah.
So if we've already started some, it'd be good to do another set, I guess, at that point, right?
Oh yeah, take advantage of the energy, and if you pay attention and take notes, I've had things planted in an exact perfect window,
Yeah.
being a couple of weeks advantage over ones that were planted in a good general
Wow, a couple
window.
of weeks, that's a lot. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah. The specific windows, like melons being very specific to Gemini,
Right.
these are the little tips of the trade that I really, when you sign up with the garden course and you get all the data that we have for you about, planting astrologically and using the biodynamic energies, and that, these are kind of fine-tuned tricks that you really get an understanding and insights into. So until we hit Saturday afternoon, when the sun leaves Pisces and goes into Aries, we have this amazing combination of Pisces, sun, so all that wonderful energy, first quarter of the moon, so all that incredible growth energy coming from that new moon. And then, we go through an earth sign into, a melon specific sign. And then we hit, the sun going into Aries, which lends warmth. And so, we've got the sun coming into Aries. We're going to see good continued growth on anything that we've got going on. Then we hit Sunday and we have a lot of shifts, the we've shifted into Aries with the sun. We're now going to shift into the second quarter with the moon. Then, we're also going to go from Gemini into a short void, of course, time. And I do mean short, like, 15 minutes long. And then around supper time, we're going to be into Cancer. So from Saturday early afternoon to Sunday supper time, it's, shift gears, shift gears, shift gears, shift gears. And you might find that a really difficult time to focus on much of anything but, the day-to-day tasks at hand. And, that's okay. When once we've shifted into Cancer, Sunday evening, we're still going to be in great planting window because the second quarter is still a growth quarter. That moon is still getting bigger. Cancer is a really good general planting sign, being that really strong water energy. So, this is, we're being offered some fabulous windows right now at the perfect time of year to give us a jump on getting all of our babies up and growing in the greenhouse. If you started early, you might already be needing to transplant up some of your tomato or pepper plants, and again, this window is going to be a good opportunity for that. So
Sounds good. I'm excited.
yeah, yeah, good times coming. Okay, well, because we're going to be planting, you got to be thinking about what you're planting into. Now, you've been doing some gardening. We've been doing some, bed prep and getting things ready at your place. And I'm sure you're noticing that this year in particular, the out of the snow's gone, and this is a nice time to start addressing, getting those beds cleaned up and ready to go. Um, so um, if you're starting in a brand new garden, or if you've got, a changing need, you're going to take this garden from being a strawberry bed to planting prize winning dahlias, or putting in blueberry bushes, or you're gonna be making changes, or you're just getting a new area opened up. It really is worth the time and energy and even a little bit of expense that it takes to do some soil testing.
Mhm.
Yeah. And now, again, and when we're looking at the what we offer in the Garden Like a Guru course, I actually show people a variety of techniques where they can do soil tests with the actual vegetables and compounds right out of their own garden, and they don't have to trot off and buy soil tests. But that it's a lengthy explanation, so that's something that's going to take a whole session in the course. But there is no substitute for good testing.
Mhm.
There's no substitute for knowing whether your soil is acidic, whether it's neutral, whether it's alkaline. And then, if you're really looking at specific things, and that you go the extra mile and find out at least what your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium kind of existing contents are. And we talked about those last week, the NPK.
Mhm.
But if you don't know where you're starting from, you're going to have a hard time getting where you want to go. And if you're taking your bed from strawberries to blueberries, you're going to have to address how you're going to produce the more acidic soil that blueberries like without affecting the other things around it that may not like the high acid need in the soil for blueberries. So, you need to do the testing before you can address amendments.
So I guess that would be almost plant specific, not necessarily bed specific, because for certain plants like certain pHs and certain conditions. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, what I usually have as my starting point is I test the beds and
right.
figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Then I go, okay, this is what conditions exist. What can I put what I've already decided I need?
Right.
Because if you can work with what's already there and you can make it work without having to go to extra labor or expense, I see that as a win.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so the testing is the first part. Now, keep in mind when you're testing a garden bed, and it's a, a kidney shaped bed that is approximately 3 feet wide and about 8 feet or so long. Um, you can't just dig one little hole and test that soil like that. That's only going to give you that little zone.
Mm,
So when you test, gather from about 8 to 10 places around the bed, combine that soil really, really well, take out a sample and test it. Because as you work that bed, as you do things in that bed, if there is one tiny little pocket with, more nitrogen, or that somebody spilled, baking soda on, or that, that one little area is going to get evened out as you work the soil, as you, plant
mm,
things around and that. And this is crucial, absolutely vital when you are doing soil testing under trees, especially fruit trees.
mm,
Okay, if you are having a fruit tree that you are having difficulty to get thriving, or bushes, or that, it is crucial that you gather from all sorts of areas underneath that canopy, and get a good mix of it, because it's all getting filtered down into that root system. And so you've got to do that from a variety of perspectives. Okay. So, once you get doing your soil testing, that you're going to be looking at amendments, and amendments come in kind of a variety of categories. The easiest one to think of would be something that you would use to amend the pH balance in the
mm,
soil. Okay, so you might be adding some oyster shell, you might be adding, some lime dust. You might, there's a variety of amendments that really only address pH balance. And so, that's sort of your simpler, more basic amendment. Then you start getting into food amendments. So you're making the decisions then as to whether or not you go to some kind of, inorganic um, based fertilizer. Are you going to be looking at organic based fertilizers? Um, what does that mean? Are you going to be looking at like crystallized liquid fertilizers? Are you going to be looking at fertilizer components like bat guano, or sea kelp? And then you can go even further and start looking at the Rudolf Steiner soil preps and biodynamic amendments. And this can get incredibly complicated. And this is something that again we would be devoting a lot of time to in the garden course. But amendments are whatever you are going to be putting into your soil to bring it into balance. And I would say the absolute bare minimum that you should think of as a gardener when it comes to soil amendments is you should be keeping a compost heap so that you can be adding compost to your garden. I really encourage you to look into how putting some of that in a burlap sack and putting it in a barrel of water and turning it into compost tea can be an absolute boon to your garden situation. Um, if you're not being able to keep up with your garden's needs with compost, then I encourage people to look at animal manures that are available to them. So at the very minimum, you need to be looking at ways that you can feed your soil. you can't expect your soil to feed plants that are going to feed you if you don't put stuff in. And it's kind of coming to light more and more and more with each generation of plants that pumping a piece of property or plants full of a readily available chemical fertilizer to get them to grow fast and produce doesn't really do the land any kind of long-term benefit. You know, it's like, it's a never-ending cycle of add more, get less off the land, add more, get less off the land. And, we're seeing that agriculture and gardening has to go way beyond sustainable and actually has to become regenerative in nature. And so, you're not going to be a successful gardener without coming to grips with the fact that you will always, 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 every year and forever be adding amendments to your soil.
Mhm. Yeah, the eternal search for things to add to your soil, right?
Yeah, yeah. I remember years and years and years ago, when circuses traveled around with things like elephants and giraffes and that, and one came to town in Salmon Arm, and a certain gentleman whom I know in the Balmoral area took his children to the circus, looked around, had a few words with the circus people, went back home, loaded up the truck with the wagon on it, and hied himself back down to the Salmon Arm Fairgrounds to load up with more elephant manure than anybody could have ever imagined. you know, I have a friend with an alpaca farm who, we hook up at least once a springtime so I can get some of her alpaca poop. And I have two friends that used to bring me rabbit poop in Enderby for my little dooryard garden that I had there that people would come and tour. So yeah, we gardeners are a crazy bunch of people. We don't mind if people give us shit.
So yeah, so talking about poop, um, what about horse? I know that there's problems with horse because of the undigested grain and seeds and all that. How about just composting it?
Um, Aged horse manure is fabulous.
Okay,
I lived for a while on a farm where they raised Norwegian fjord horses, and my landlord would bring his tractor down with a bucket full of stuff that he'd scraped the top off the pile and dug right out from underneath. Um, and It would be steaming and teeming with life. I mean, but it would be hot,
mm,
from being towards the bottom of this pile and working. And when you get compost, like heating the compost pretty much kills any weed seeds or
right,
things that are going to drift in. And um, if you're a certified organic producer of anything and you cannot get manure from a certified organic facility close to your farm, you can bring in manure from a non-certified facility, but you have to keep it isolated in a specific area and you have to allow it to heat to a specific temperature for a specific length of time, and you have to record all of this. And this is to make sure that none of the GMO
right.
organisms will sprout, that none of those seeds will be viable, that they're going to be cooked right out before they even get to the ground or, anything else. Because, yes, seeds can pass through an animal's digestive system completely undigested, and that can happen a lot with horse. Now, it seems to me no matter how much you age horse manure, no matter how much you age, you will never eradicate purslane and lamb's quarters
Okay.
in it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now there's a bonus to that in that both of those plants are amazingly tasty and vitamin nutrient rich spring foods that are going to be up and growing and productive and edible far before anything that you can plant in the ground. So, learning how to harvest and eat purslane, in my opinion, is one of the best solutions to it as a byproduct in horse manure.
Hmm.
Horse manure tends to be not as well digested because horses only have one stomach, and most
Right.
of our ruminants have many more than that. And so, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like mulched up grass and grain, and it's going to be very high in nitrogen.
Hmm.
Can give you, especially because it's a natural nitrogen base, and the plants can access it relatively easily. It can be a real boon. It has some real benefits to it. But you have to use it with a certain amount of caution. One of the easiest ones to use that's really quite lovely is rabbit.
Mm.
And for small holders, like people who are looking at a small acreage with it and getting as much sort of regenerative self-sufficiency going, combining raising rabbits and raising gardens and using the rabbit poop to fertilize and embellish the garden with, and using a lot of your garden trimmings and byproducts to feed your rabbits with, is about as close as you can get to the old fur farm idea where they were going to let it get run over with rats, and then they were going to bring in the cats, and they'd feed the rats to the cats and the cats to the rats, and
Mm.
skin
Right.
both of them and have the fur. You can't quite do that, but you can raise a garden and give what you can't eat to rabbits and chickens, and then take the poop from what they produce and use it to embellish and grow your garden. And both sides of the fence.
Right.
Yeah. So, I know every year in Enderby, this is highly regional, but every year in Enderby, the Enderby Garden Club has a plant and goat poop sale. And they hit the local goat dairies, fill up 5-pound bags and or 20-pound bags, and sell them for like a paltry $5 a piece, and it's all a fundraiser for
Mm.
and that. But yeah, no, soil amendments are totally and completely a part of every single annual garden setup.
So goat poop looks pretty good then.
Oh yeah, yeah. Goat poop's good. It doesn't have the extremely high refined nitrogen content that you
Hmm.
get with cattle.
Yeah.
It can burn your garden, like it can just like kill it, but it's well enough digested with them being a ruminant that it's not going to be carrying any seeds. And like rabbit poop, it is pelletized.
Right.
So it's actually not that unpleasant to deal with. I mean, still wear your gloves on your hands and,
Right.
and that, but you're not running the risk of accidentally going wrist deep in something really foul, like could happen occasionally with cow.
Right. I did see a garden in Salmon Arm where she had used horse pucks literally as a cover to keep weeds down,
Yeah.
right? Horse pucks. And it really looked quite interesting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, until they start really breaking down, and the seeds in them won't even really germinate.
Yeah, this was like, it was very, very dry, right? Like
Yeah.
super dry.
Yeah. Yeah, and, there's gonna be a little bit of leaching in that. But that's what I found I could do with goat or, llama or alpaca or rabbit.
Yeah,
It's all nice little pellets. It's mixed in with the straw bedding. I'm not going to get any kind of weeds.
yeah.
It's just right there, and it works just fine. Um, oh, somebody just asked about pig poop.
Yeah, that's Lois.
Hey, um, yeah. Uh, Pig manure is strong. Okay. And it's really best if you age it a year or two so that the smell of it doesn't cause either you to become violently ill to your stomach or your neighbors to come over and tell you how thoroughly unimpressed they are. And I mean neighbors 10 miles away, okay? Like pig manure is incredibly strong, and one of the problems with it is pigs tend to urinate while they are defecating. And they also tend to go to a specific area of their pen to do this. And so you get an amazing concentration of ammonia
Mm.
in pig poop. And it requires leaching out. And so it's great once you get beyond that. If you have a place to spread it out and let it dry and kind of turn it over and let it dry some more, and you do that a few times, you can use what you cleaned out in the springtime by, late fall applications to the garden. But most of the time you're going to find that unless you've got a lot of area to spread it out and deal with it, it's going to take a good year, maybe even two. And applications of liquid, like, to get that ammonia content down. Yeah.
So what about adding, if you're worried about whether your manure is at the right stage, what about putting it in as a layer in your compost?
Yeah,
Uh,
that can work really well, actually. We just had one of our people say that they used some pig poop that had been 5 years composted and it had no smell. And it probably worked really, really well. One of the things that, when we're talking about garden bed prep, there's row beds and then there's raised beds. And in raised beds, the layered idea is actually, there's a whole book called Lasagna Gardening, and it's fabulous and wonderful. But I have to admit that 1 inch and 2 inch layers of, like, I think she has like 10 or 13 of them. It is just a little more OCD than I can bring myself to be. I've done it by the book in, 3 or 4 demonstration situations, including community gardens and teaching gardens and that. And the results are fantastic. Like, I will not deny that one bit. The results are fantastic. I just found it so painstaking, and I'm often sort of slapdash in some of
mm,
the approaches. And but layering is fabulous and it's crucial. And although I don't go, to the extreme she does in lasagna gardening, I do love to do layers. And so if I were doing a raw area with technique we call sheet mulching. The first step would be to just, with a scythe or just walking all over it, would be to knock down all these standing grass and light vegetation. The next um, stage would be to cover it completely with manure. The next stage would be to put cardboard over top of that, then heavy bark mulch over top of that, then cut holes in the cardboard and plant your trees and shrubs so that they're down into the manure, water well, and away you go. So that's one of the ways that I layer manure in.
Mhm.
I will use the rabbit manure, the llama manure. I will use it literally as a top dressing mulch on the side of certain things. Now, I might not want it cheek by jowl with my lettuce because I want to go and just, pick it up and eat it. But using it in that just poop and hay mixture as a mulch at the base of my corn is awesome. It does a great job of weed control and moisture retention, and all the nutrients are repetitively leaching in. So um, I've also done garden beds where you've got nice soil and you want to use that nice soil, but there's a lot of weed infestation in it. So I'll layer with cardboard, then manure, then another light layer of soil, then hay or straw as a top mulch, and then, or the hemp cloth. The hemp cloth is another top mulch that I can use. And then I make holes in that top mulch and plant directly into that soil that has the layer of manure underneath it. The cardboard keeps any of the weeds managing to push their way through long enough that they kind of die off. And worms will eat it, and any of the root system from a plant I'm planting will be able to go right through it and access the soil underneath it. So it can easily be incorporated into, pretty much direct application on the garden. The more aged and mellow it is, the more readily it can be applied right directly to the garden. Yeah. But when you're getting your gardens ready, you've got garden beds, or a garden that has a lot of what we would call row crops, and that's pretty traditional. And it's pretty traditional to have a lot of weeds in that scenario. And I know that, my mother's answer to getting the weeds out of the garden was giving it a darn good tilling every single year, get the rototiller out and churn all that up. And it does get rid of the weeds, but it also kind of takes you back to ground zero in terms of soil. Whereas we know that, the activity in soil, the microbial actions, all in that top little layer. And, you might not want that grass or those lamb's quarters, but you do want that top layer. And whether you know it or not, you actually want the nutrients that are already caught up in those plants. So, there's a variety of ways that you can do bed prep with row crops, but primarily, you want to look at how you can get rid of the weeds without necessarily tilling that soil. And keep in mind, no matter what technique you choose, anything you put on the garden that is not going to be able to just rot in place will have to be dealt with somehow or other. Okay. So if you start with my least favorite of choke out the weed technique, it would be black plastic.
Mhm.
Okay, it works. It increases the heat on the bed. The soil heats up really, really rapidly. Your weeds burn right off. Like, it works incredibly well. It also off gases a bit, which, can or cannot be a problem depending on what kind of black plastic you use. And let me warn you that the more it was designed to deal with garbage, the more chemicals it's going to have in it. So something that was a covering for lumber may actually be less toxic to your ground than, using, stretched out garbage bags. But going to a garden store and getting the actual plastic that they sell that is theoretically safer is probably indeed, your best bet in terms of that. The downside to black plastic is you got to take it up again. And if you think you can leave it in the ground and cut holes and plant in it and it's all going to be good and it's all going to be lovely, it's not. If not the first year, sometime in the second year, or bless you all to pieces, sometime late in the third year when it's now a right deteriorating mess all over the place, you are going to have to deal with it. And yes, that includes in rock gardens. Okay, so that's the problem with black plastic. You are always, always, always at some point in time going to have to rip things up all over the place and get chunks of it out of there. Um, Clear plastic, believe it or not, can be used almost as effectively or as effectively as black plastic. Now, I know when you put clear plastic down, initially, you've trapped moisture, you've trapped some heat, and things go like crazy. Yeah, that's fine until the temperature gets hot. And then everything under that plastic burns. And many a gardener has found that out the hard way, not realizing they have to get out there and get that plastic covering off of their baby chamomile or their delicate thyme or whatever it was they were starting. And by noon, everything under that plastic is completely fried. So clear plastic put down and left in place when the weather gets hot can also do a stellar job of killing off your weeds. And chances are good you're going to roll it up and use it to do the same thing again, or use it on the side of your greenhouse or to make other things with. So I see it as at least more usable and versatile than the black plastic. Landscape fabric won't work on its own. Grass and a lot of things, the landscape fabric lets enough light through and has enough space in it that it can let very thin bladed grasses and that come through. So then you've got landscape fabric with quackgrass nicely woven into it, and it doesn't work. Now there are some nice landscape papers that are only designed to last a year. They come in a 4-foot by 100-foot rolls, and they don't stand up the season. They're not designed to. They're designed to rot right back into the ground as the season progresses. And this is beautiful because then, it gives you that head start you need. It gives you that weed barrier that you need. It holds the moisture in. The water can soak right through it. And as the plants take up and don't really allow for room for the weeds, this starts rotting away and it simply embellishes your soil. The worms are eating it and it's all good. Now for for my own preference, I really like mulches of various varieties, and one of the nicest ones is a hemp fabric mulch, and we get it. It's a lovely roll. It's like what's the end of it? It's about the thickness of a indoor outdoor carpet. It's like you can roll it out, cut holes in it, plant plants between it, cut it into squares, plant it, place it and plant your plants at the junctions of the square. Water goes right through it. Weeds can't really make their way up through it. It's really tough. It's really durable. In some cases, it'll last a couple of years. In other cases, depending on what it's been around and how much kind of moving and shifting we've had to do with it, sometimes it's kind of done at the end of the first year. Usually I can get 2 years out of it. When it's new and fresh, and the reason I have it in these rolls, as opposed to the size roll you'd go out and put on your garden, and I do have it. It comes in 4-foot by 100-foot rolls, actually. This is scaled down because I sell them to people to grow their sprouts and microgreens on in the winter. You can grow more than one crop on them. You can wash them, pick everything off, start again. You don't have to worry about the mold factors way down. Super easy to deal with, way easier than the sprout trays, so we use a lot of it, and that because that's a product that Wise Woman Seed carries, for the people who sign up for the levels of the Garden Like a Guru course that give you kind of the full meal deal, you get a discount on Wise Woman Seed products, and that would include this hemp mulch, whether you were buying, a minor amount like this to start things on, or whether you were looking at a 400-foot roll. You could apply your discount to that purchase as easily as you could to the seeds or other things. Hemp has a lot of things going for it, and I really over the years have found that the job that this does in terms of weed control and water retention, it's cut my gardening, my weed maintenance end of my gardening to way less than half, and it has dropped my water usage by anywhere from 30 to as much as 60%. If I'm using it in a shade garden situation with greens and that in it, I'm using 40% of the water that I used without without this kind of mulch to hold the moisture in. So, it's got a phenomenal number of benefits to it, and like the landscape paper I was talking about early, ultimately it's biodegradable and is going to embellish your soil and land instead of the other way around. So whether you're willing to deal with the kind of high garbage disposal hassle that comes with the plastic, or you're wanting to go as far on the other end as possible, you kind of have to address the fact that one way or another you kind of got to get a fair number of the weed potential out of your garden at the first part of the year in order for you to have a garden that's going to, in the long run, become productive.
So how about newspaper and straw?
Oh, fabulous alternatives. Absolutely wonderful alternatives. Most newsprint now, and I do mean newsprint, okay, not glossy magazines. When we say newspaper, we're talking about, the stuff that you could use as fire starter, okay? Now, most of that, even the colored stuff these days, is all vegetable ink. And so there is nothing in there that is going to be problematic for the most part. Worms love paper, and they love it even better if you shred it up a bit for them. Newspaper in whole layers laid down with something on top of it to weigh it down, and that something can indeed be another type of mulch. They make a fabulous weed barrier in and of themselves, and they're really easy to work with. We've at time laughed about calling them shingle gardens, where
Mm.
we would get the newspapers that had the free newspapers that hadn't really been delivered, and we'd take the whole bundles and we just lay them out unfolded up, so there'd be multiple layers, and we'd do a whole area, and then we'd cover it with straw. And with newspaper, you have to be aware that if you don't get it covered quickly, it is going to blow around on you. So,
Right.
you got to be aware of that. Otherwise, you just create yourself a whole lot of work. But newspaper is absolutely fabulous. Straw, whether you put it on top of newspaper or use it directly on the gardens themselves, again, it's absolutely fabulous. It retains moisture, it allows the rain to go through, it makes it really hard for the weeds to get up and through in any kind of start. If they do work their way through, it's like pluck to get them out again. It's not a problem. It's fabulous. Hay can be really good too, but hay often has seeds in it. So and again, they're pretty easy to pluck out, but it can become an annoyance, and it can, if not handled right, lead to more weed infestation in later years. But they're excellent choices and often readily available. And anything that you're using like that and returning into the soil is a boon to it. Mm.
So I mean, we were in this area here, so it might be not very helpful for others or that don't live in this area, but do you know of good sources of straw?
Um,
I know if you do it at Buckerfields, it's pretty darn expensive, right?
yeah, no, that's a very expensive route to go. Um, I actually I actually resort to, looking at classified ads for
That's a good idea. Okay, good
yeah,
idea.
there's a couple of really good hay and straw farmers between Salmon Arm and Armstrong in that kind of Grindrod, Enderby area. And
I've seen a straw stored in a barn by the Pioneer farm, which name I can't remember.
oh, the Haney Heritage
Yeah,
Farm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the things that's a good alternative in this area, particularly because we have the option, is there are hay farmers who are lucky enough to get what we call a second crop grass hay cutting.
Mhm.
Now, what that means is that they've cut like probably before the 1st of June, and then sometime in July, before all the things are going to seed and that they've had enough growth that they can come in there and cut again. But there's no seed in it usually. It's just grass stem. It hasn't had the opportunity to really grow. It's outgrown the weeds that you get in the first cutting, and
Yeah.
it's got this fine grass, and you really don't know. You're probably going to be paying $8 a bale or so, in this day and age. But the average garden really only needs a couple of bales.
Mhm.
Also, once you make friend with a farmer, once you like have bought some bales of hay or straw or that, and you've talked to them a bit and they realize, that you're a gardener, you're doing this and you're doing that, they will start doing things often like saying, oh, we broke a couple of bales of straw. They're all over in the back there. You're here to pick up these ones. You want to get those? And I say, yeah, I'll grab a garbage bag and shove as much straw as I can into the bag. Or they'll tell you that they got some of last year's hay that's rotting, and
Right.
well, I want to do hay bale greenhousing. Rotten hay bales would be awesome. You have to establish relationships with
Right.
people, I think, if you want to get in on all the good stuff without it costing all that money.
You're part of the farm cleanup crew.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd be surprised how generous farmers are if you're willing to be accommodating and helpful to them. But yeah, it's definitely time to get out of the house and start poking around in the dirt and getting things ready.
So we've got 5 minutes to go. So there are other things that we want to make sure we get covered in this show. And of course, we want to let people know what's coming up next week.
Oh, yeah, we talked a little bit about, bed prep and raised beds, and doing
Yeah.
layers. But the other thing is a lot of people are doing a lot more container planting. And it's really important to keep in mind that containers have so little space and margin for error that you kind of have to build container soil as opposed to just dig up garden soil.
Yeah.
You can do a raised garden bed with just garden dirt and embellishments in that. But container planting, you actually have to blend a nice container recipe. We do 3 or 4 of them in the course of, in the garden course. We look at ones for, growing vegetables and, growing your various things that you might want, and whether you're, so you can build a real soil profile. But containers compact too easily for you to get away with just using garden soil and manure. They take that extra little bit, but then they do produce, 3 to 5 times as much per square foot as a row bed. So, it's a trade-off.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it's like container mixes. You can indeed buy them. But once you get into a lot of gardening, you're going to find that that's an expensive way to go. And there are things that can be made and embellished at home just by using the right proportions of stuff. If you've got a source for the various components on your property, then it ends up saving you a lot of money in the long run. But sadly, you can't just fill those pots up with a spade and access to the back 40.
No, that doesn't really work. And of course, you have to be careful with containers because they dry out so quickly, right? So
yeah, and there's tricks and tips for that as well. Ways. I like to teach people all the various ways of keeping their containers and their hanging planters hydrated and not wilting without them having to resort to automatic timers or never leaving home.
Right. Yeah, I've done things like styrofoam and all sorts of weird and wonderful things to try and make it work, right?
Yeah, well, one of my favorites is a water bottle with holes cut into it, buried in the center of the pot before you actually put any of your plants and that in it. You put the water bottle in there, you've got holes poked in it, you pack the dirt around it, you fill it up with water, and you plant into the soil. If you take the lid right off the water bottle, it'll seep out a lot more quickly than if you just remove it a certain way. But it'll keep your container, it'll dispense like a quart, whatever size that water bottle is, it'll dispense that amount of water at a kind of calibrated rate.
Nice.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a cheapskate.
So what are we doing next week?
Oh, next week we will be looking at actually getting some of those transplants into larger pots, into and it will definitely be time to looking at things like peas and spinach and radishes directly into the ground. So we'll be talking spacing and successional planting of those crops, and which ones are quick crops that you're going to be refreshing throughout the year, and which ones you have to plan right now for a lengthy period of time for them. And yeah,
Wow, that sounds good.
Yeah, we should have fun with it.
All right. Well, Beth, thank you very much. Lots of good information. I took lots of notes. And don't forget, you can sign up for the course and you get even more.
Yeah, like all those wonderful recipes for the container soil.
That's right. All right. That's it for now. Thank you for showing up. And we're back same time, same place next week.
Yep. See you all then.